Are going on right now for another 10 minutes. The Houston locker room is open for the next 30 minutes. And also, for the next 30 minutes, we're joined by the head coach of Houston, Kelvin Samson. Coach, having a good day so far?
So far, yeah. No, we've been doing this now for our, conference tournament. SIU, we had to beat BYU to get to Arizona. We had to beat SIUE to get to Gonzaga, and we had to beat Purdue to get to Tennessee, and now we're here. So we've been doing this for like 4 straight weeks.
And we'll keep it rolling. If you have a question for Coach Samson, please raise your hand. Let's start in the third row. Then we'll come up. Then we'll go to Eddie. Then Dan. We'll make our way across the room. We're going to have a great time.
Coach Matt Roy, News 4, Fox SA here in San Antonio. Wanted to ask you about Terrence Arsenault. Obviously, you know his history in this building and his 2 championships. The junior year, probably the more significant of the 2. Does that give him, a little bit of an advantage? And can you just tell me about what he's done for your team this year?
Yeah, there's always one guy, I think, on your roster that you felt like you could have or probably should have gotten more minutes for. As a coach, you're always saying, I needed to have gotten Terrence in there a little more tonight. But, like in the Tennessee game, Juan picked up 2 quick ones. Terrence goes in and scores 8 consecutive points or thereabouts. But he's capable of that. Terrence is... he's a 6'6" basketball player. He's not a 4 and he's not a 3. He's not a 2. He's just a really good player, and he's bailed us out a lot of nights. Now, a lot of nights, Sharp and Cryer have had it going. I've closed games with Malik Wilson because of his ability to guard multiple positions. But Terrence is a huge part of our success this year for sure.
Coach, we're going to stay up front to the left, second row.
Hey, Coach Robbie Listella, Bracketeer.org. I talked to some of the guys in the locker room yesterday, and some use last season's loss as motivation to come back this year, and some wipe the slate clean. I'm curious, from your perspective, is there a healthier approach for last season in terms of using it this year, or is it better individual player basis?
Last year has nothing to do with this year for me. I mean, we have a new team, so it's irrelevant to me.
We're going to go to the center of the room with Eddie. I'm going to use the front right microphone.
Hi, Coach. Eddie Pels from AP. I poking around on the internet, I saw your loose ball drill a little bit, and I was wondering if you could kind of explain the origin of that, what you're trying to get out of it, and how well it works or doesn't.
What was the first part of that about the poking around? What did you say?
He was on the internet and he saw your loose ball drill.
I've never seen that. So I've got to find the culprit that filmed that.
Okay.
No, I've always done that. It's usually the first drill. There's probably a couple of drills that I do. First drill of the year. And then I don't do it anymore because, something happens once, it could be a accident. Happens twice, it could be a coincidence. If it happens 3 or more times, it can and should be a habit. And I think as coaches, whatever it is we're teaching, we're trying to create habits, good habits. And as long as they're doing that naturally, I don't need to do a drill. Matter of fact, I don't even like that drill. I don't like doing drills. I'd rather them be like that anyway. But I've had some kids that I've had to, not necessarily the team, like Emmanuel Sharp. Emmanuel Sharp doesn't need to do that drill. Milos Uzan did when he got here. L.J. Cryer probably did. But most of our guys, every loose ball in practice, if we're having practice, and I don't care what day it is, it could be today. If there's a loose ball, then there should be a habit of getting on the floor after it.
just to follow, are there any rules to that drill other than get the ball? I mean, it looked like it was a basic free-for-all, but...
Yeah, I've never really had anybody look at that and then give me their expert analysis of it. Yeah, it's pretty much whoever technically whoever gets it is on offense, and whoever does not get it's on defense. So we try to be multi-effort with that drill. Now, sometimes I just do the drill with a individual against nobody. You know, sometimes I may just drop the ball, let it pitter-patter to a stop, and when I blow the whistle, we'll see how quick they get to it. Everything's a competition, you know. But, you know, like our kids say, it's not for everybody, but it is for the ones that are here.
Coach, we'll move to the back of the room on the right side. Dan?
Yeah, Dan Wolken, USA Today. Kelvin, I wanted to follow up on something you said yesterday about how nobody talks about Coach Shire replacing Coach K anymore. How difficult is it from your perspective with your history in the game, what they've actually been able to pull off to make that transition as relatively seamlessly as they have?
Well, I've been knowing Mike for a long, long time. You know, since he's moved into you guys' world as a media guy. I've been on his radio show, and we've had conversations. I don't like it when people say he's the GOAT. Mike Krzyzewski is certainly a GOAT, but a lot of that stuff is so generational. But Mike Krzyzewski, during his generation, was the standard for everybody. And I think Mike deserves a lot of credit for being involved in the process to pick John. He coached John. He worked with John. So John had a head start. And when he had his press conference, you know, a lot of people talked about that. He's replacing a legend, and he was. But this is John's third year, right? So in his third year, you know, it's not talked about as much. And that's a credit to both of them. Mike for having a huge part of choosing the right guy. And then John for being independent enough to become his own person with his choosing his staff, doing that general manager thing. I still don't know what that is. You know, we got managers. I'm not sure they're have any. They wipe the floor up though. they bring me water halfway through. I mean, they have important roles, but probably not as good as a general manager.
Different compensation probably, too.
Probably.
Fourth row on the left.
Hey, Coach, Evan Miyakawa from evanmia.com. Of all the teams in the Final Four this year, you guys are the most reliant on returning players. I think about 80% of your minutes are from guys who were on the roster last year. Is that roster continuity important to you, and how has that played a role in how this team has done this year?
Yeah, it is to us. You know, when Cooper Flagg chose to reclassify, I think he showed up at 17 years old. Am I right saying that? Well, that's how old J.Juan Roberts was when he came to us, too. We had 5 guys 17 years old. Jamal Shead was 17. JoJo was 17. J.Juan Roberts was 17. Javier Francis was 17, and I'm missing somebody. But a lot of our guys turned 18 either in the summer or in the fall. But I have a great staff, and I think the strength of our program is maybe not recruiting the 5-star guys that a lot of the schools that are here do, but we develop guys into 5 stars, and we take a lot of pride in that. You know, Marcus Sasser was probably ranked 300 and something. He wasn't the top 10, he was top 300. He was a 25th pick in the draft, top first-round draft choice. Jamal Shead was not It's probably a 2-something. But I've got a great staff that's been with me a long time, either played for me or shared a house with me growing up, my son. And they're really good at that, and I give them a lot of leadway, a lot of responsibility. And that's why our success is a shared success. I give a lot of credit to my staff for doing an awesome job.
Coach, on the right side, to the left of the aisle.
Kelvin, Mike Finger from the San Antonio Express News. I know Pop reached out to you this week. I'm wondering if you got a chance to talk to him or see him this week. And also, do you still consider the year you spent here, the few months you spent here, as being sort of transformative, important for your career?
Yeah, Pop and I have been in contact, and we're gonna hook up here. But it's transformative. Is important. But we all have we all have friends that all of you have friends that have helped you along the way. I like to think I've done that with a lot of young coaches, helping them along the way. That's our responsibility. My dad was a high school basketball coach, and even until the week he passed away, he was helping somebody. So I just think that's important to do. Pop and I we have a, we don't, I'm not a former player. Pop runs, when I was with San Antonio, the thing that jumped out at me is he runs the Spurs very much like a college program. He talked to Tim and Manu and Tony very much like I would talk to Galen or to, well, maybe not that close, though. I saw him get on Tony. But there was mutual respect there. I think that's what makes Pop special is he shows great respect, and he gets it back. And what he did for me, I've tried to pay that forward many times.
Coach, we're going to try to attempt to flex our technology, and we're going to go to Josh in Montana. Josh, can you hear us?
Good morning. Over here it's morning. Over in Central Time it's afternoon. But good morning, Coach Samson. Josh Margolis here from NBC Montana in Butte. I was just curious.
Butte.
Yes. I know you spent a lot of time here.
What's the temperature in Butte today?
Right now, we're looking at about 26 degrees. Not too bad. We're going to be up
a
in
warm
the 60s
stretch
by
coming.
next week. Last weekend of skiing coming up. So
Yeah.
big fun coming up ahead. But quick question for you. I mean, could you kind of talk a little bit about how critical your time at Montana Tech was to get you to where you are now, and the importance of maintaining relationships with people like the current head coach there, Adam Hyatt, and your former assistant, John Thatcher?
Well, John sold New York life insurance, and he would come over and help us in the afternoons. He was a Butte guy. He taught me a lot about Butte. But, Karen, my wife and I got married when we were 23 years old. She was a school teacher, and she gave up her career to help me chase this crazy dream I had. But Judd Heathcote went to his freshman year, I think just a semester, but he went to college at Montana Tech. He coached high school basketball later in Spokane, Washington, I think West Valley High School. And then he played for Marv Harshman at Washington State, and then hired me as his grad assistant at Michigan State, which is a roundabout way of saying that's how I got to Montana Tech through Judd Heathcote. But they named me the head coach, but they never had a winning season. Everybody there that played, every student was an engineer. I could never have gotten into school there, and I'm coaching those guys in basketball. I think every curriculum required a minimum of 30 credits of math. It was metallurgical engineering, right? Mining engineering, petroleum engineering. Yeah, I could never go to school there. But they hired me as their basketball coach because it was not important. If it had been important, they would have never hired me. And I felt a lot of those guys that were seniors were older than I was. We're the same age. I was 24, and they were in their 5th or 6th year because they were doing something extra onto their curriculums. And said, Coach, I can't make practice today. They didn't ask me. They just said, hey, I'm not going to be at practice today. Now that would be taboo. I wouldn't listen to that. But then it was, sometimes we'd only have 7 on a road trip, which meant we didn't have to take a bus. We just would go to motor pool, and they'd give me the keys to the van. And then they would give me no credit cards. I just have enough money to go fill the. They knew how far the trip was, so they gave me enough money to get gas, and I had to turn in all the receipts for those trips. I wasn't very good. It was a great coaches league, and I learned a lot from them. I felt bad for our kids at Montana Tech because they had to have me as their coach. Our first year we went 4-22. Judd Heathcote called me up the day after that Monday. Season ended on Saturday. My phone rang, and this would have been in 1982. Judd calls up and says, hey, Kel, I just want to congratulate you. You're the only coach in captivity that possibly could have taken Montana Tech from obscurity to oblivion. Gotta go, Kel. It's a true story.
So that was a question from NBC Montana. We're going to take our next question from Pete Thamel, but as Pete's asking his question, we're going to welcome Juwan Roberts to come in and join us here at the dais. He's going to sit next to Coach Samson. Also a reminder that the Houston locker room continues to be open until 12:45. Pete.
Thanks. Kelvin, it's a good segue to a legacy question. Obviously, these Final Four runs, people tend to think back and ponder. What do you hope your legacy is when you do finish?
Kind of what the gentleman asked me about, Pop. You can't control what people think. The thing I've noticed about, being in this position is most people that have opinions of you don't know you. So they're basing their opinion on what someone else said, and I would encourage people before you make statements about somebody, get to know the person. He's might not be what you think. But I would hope my legacy would be, I tried to help my kids be the best they could be so that when they got older, they were in a position to help somebody be the best they could be. If that's my legacy, then I think I've had a career worth having.
This next portion of our news conference availability is for the full court press program. That's with the black lanyards and the day passes for today. We'll take some questions for Juwan Roberts and for Coach Samson. If you have one, raise your hand. In the front on the left.
Hi, Coach Samson. One thing that really touched me, Arden Flight's full court press, one thing that really touched me was how you spoke about your relationship with your father, going and calling him after every single game. Mm-hmm. Now, what does it mean to you to have your son next to you through all of this?
Well, he doesn't have to get off the bus and find a payphone. He can walk up the aisle and tap me on the shoulder, so it's a little bit easier for him. My dad was when he was coaching, and this is why he was my hero, and I admired him so much, is that high school coaches in North Carolina in the 60s and 70s, 80s, 50s, you only had a 9-month contract. So there was 3 months he had to hustle. He had to go find jobs, and I can tell you what his jobs were. He taught driver's ed. He sold Lincoln Life Insurance. He sold World Book Encyclopedia, which was Google before cell phones. My mother used to make us read that, so we do get on the SAT. And then the fourth thing, he worked at tobacco markets in Lumberton, North Carolina. We were from this little country town called Pembroke. But I learned a lot from him. So, you know, during those days, you know, that was during segregation. You know, like tobacco markets were different. You had 3 different bathrooms: white, colored, and other. That was it. That's where he worked. He'd take me to work with him, and then all of a sudden, when I got older, I had a job with him. But you know, those 3 months, I probably learned more from him in those 3 months than I did in the other 9 months. Because you know, you got a family, you got to feed your family. That's your job. You know, coach all you want, but you got to take care of your family.
You had a follow-up?
Yes.
Same microphone.
And I would love to know, is fella something that you call your son now?
Well, my father called Kellen that too. So hardly ever. When I played for him too, you know, he was inducted into the North Carolina High School Coaches Hall of Fame. I don't remember the year, but I was coaching at Oklahoma, and I remember flying in for it. And I realized that the same year that he was being inducted, David Thompson's high school coach in Shelby, North Carolina, and Dominique Wilkins' high school coach in Little Washington, North Carolina, and John Willie Samson from little old Pembroke. And I said, you know, the coach from Shelby Crest, best player was David Thompson. The coach from Little Washington, best player was Dominique Wilkins. And one of his best players was me. That probably tells you why he got in the Hall of Fame. If he could win games with me, he must have been a Hall of Fame coach. But he never called me fella during games or practices. But as soon as he'd flip over, he never called me Kelvin. He always called me fella.
Up front on the right. Question for Juwan.
Hi, guys. Ryan Hopper, Full Court Press. For either one of y'all, how do you guys draw on your experience when that is one of the advantages y'all have over a young team in Duke? You know, Juwan, you've been in the program for 5 years now.
6.
Oh, 6, excuse me.
You know, when I first got here at 17, I had a lot of guys, you know, that I could learn from. Dejan, Bryson, Justin, Fabian. Those guys, you know, they took me under the wing, you know, as vets. And I didn't know what I was getting myself into, you know, when I first got to University of Houston. I didn't know what the culture was. I didn't know the in and outs of it. And I think those guys, you know, helped me along the way, especially when I redshirted. You know, I took a lot of notes from those guys, learned as much as I can. And as years went by, I kind of understood the system, and I just surrendered. And, you know, being with Coach for 6 years, I kind of understood what he was doing. You know, at first I didn't know. I didn't know why he was screaming at me so much. I didn't know why he ran me so much. I didn't know what it was until I see that he only wants the best for me. You know, he always wants me to go out and play to the best of my ability and help as much of those guys, you know, that I can. So having guys like LJ coming over from Baylor, you know, he won a national championship. You know, he knows how to win. Playing with Marcus, playing with Jamal, playing with Quentin, all those guys are great players that helped me, you know, along the way. And me being in my 6th year, I have a different role on this team now that, you know, Mercy, you know, said, Chase, those younger guys, look at this program as a winning program and see me as being here the longest. And I learned so much from Coach Samson and how to be a practice player every day, you know, how to be a leader every day. And, you know, I would probably text Coach probably once every 2 months, and I appreciate him for giving me the opportunity to play at University of Houston. And I appreciate him for, you know, taking the time out to coach me and make me the man I am today. And I can honestly say I look at him as, you know, my second father. And I can honestly say that. He taught me so much from 17 years old to 23. And I feel like being a vet on this team now, I play for him. He put in so much blood, sweat, and tears into the program, into us, to want to see us do good. So just being a vet, I just try my hardest to, lead by example and just trying to make him proud.
We'll take another question in the second row.
Dorian Waller, Arizona State University and Cronkite News. This is a question for both Juwan and Coach Samson. There's a recent viral video on Twitter of your practices. People are commenting on the intensity of them. Can you talk about how that intensity transfers from practice to the game?
Juwan first, please.
What video was it? I'm finding out there's some leaks.
Give the microphone
leaks
back.
in the system.
It was actually a clip of 2 videos. I think one, the players were diving on the ground for loose balls, and I think they went crashing into the chairs, and people were kind of shocked by how intense that was.
That would be the floor.
Like the floor, you calling the chairs the floor? Or?
No, I'm calling it the ground.
Oh, the floor, the court floor, excuse me.
Yeah. And so what's the question?
How does that intensity in practice translate to the games?
Juwan, do you want to take that first?
It, John.
That's all we know. Coach has a standard that he comes into practice with every day, and that's playing hard and competing. And he always says competing is a competition, whether it's a rebound, and it's who wants it more. And I feel like when you go into games, the games are a lot more easier because practice is so hard. And when you practice a certain way in practice, when you get to the game, it's like the team's not ready for this, but we are. So if we ever match up with a team that's similar to us, intensity-wise, I feel like we always have the upper hand because we've been doing this since June, before the season started. So going into games with the intensity of making teams uncomfortable or playing hard, I think that's what gets us going.
Coach, you want to add?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that impresses me most about Duke's team. First of all, they don't have any freshmen. They were freshmen in November and December. They were sophomores in January and February. March and April, they're vets. I watched Cooper Flagg. He's one year we were playing Syracuse in the Elite Eight to go to the Final Four, and Syracuse's best player was Carmelo Anthony. I coached against Gary Payton as a freshman, Sean Elliott, Jason Kidd, Paul Pierce, T.J. Ford, a lot of great players. This guy's right there with all of them. It's hard to say what he's not good at. Now, he's not as great at some things he is at others, but his floor is really good at everything. But his ceiling is just his size, and he finishes with his left hand around the paint, right hand. He's got a floater, can make a 3. Really good free throw shooter. If you double him, you better get there quick because he can pass. I think the guy that doesn't get talked about enough is Proctor. Seen his numbers? The guy's shooting 64% from the floor, and he's shooting higher than that from the 3. Kneppel, I'd love to coach Kneppel. He plays hard, tough, smart. And you can tell this team has John's imprint on it. We scrimmaged Duke a few years ago. I don't remember what year that was. Proctor, I think he was a freshman, though. Proctor was a freshman. You can tell he was a freshman. You remember that scrimmage? Mm-hmm. Who else was on that? Filipowski. I don't remember the other players. Who else was on that team? Roach, yeah. Roach was on that team. But Proctor didn't play very good that day. And I remember John called and said, would I mind giving him a scouting report on his team, and he would give a scouting report on ours. And so I remember talking about Proctor to him, and he talked about how important his growth would be. And now when you look at him now, he's elite in every area. But the area that he's improved the most in is his toughness. Proctor's tough. Kneppel's tough. Flagg is tough. Zion James, we played against Zion James 2 years at Tulane. He was probably the fourth best player on his team at Tulane. That's true. But that speaks to John Shire's ability to put his team together. He chose Zion James. Zion James' intelligence, his basketball IQ, his toughness, and he's a winner. And he doesn't require shots. He can make them, but he doesn't have to have them, and which is important on that team, because the guy you want to be shooting all your balls is those three. You want Proctor, Kneppel, and Flagg shooting all the balls. Offense is not an equal opportunity position. The best shooters should be shooting the balls, and that's what Duke's really good at.
We want to thank Coach Samson and thank Juwan Roberts for joining us here in the main interview room. They're going to head back to the locker room, which is now closed, and they're going to get on the deck and have their open practice coming up next. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, guys.
What up, Galen?
Care